Hi, and welcome to this webcast sponsored by AMC Bridge on when will manufacturing and AEC embrace the cloud for engineering data and software. Today, we've got a great lineup of speakers that really are industry veterans that have been responsible for setting the direction and really making a lot of improvements in the industry. In the engineering software space, both for manufacturing and AEC, and all of whom have been involved in moving, moving in the direction of the cloud and following this trend and leading it, in fact. So I'm excited for everybody to hear from them today. I'm going to just ask if everybody could introduce themselves briefly and a little bit of your background with the cloud, and we're going to start with Igor, because you're on the left from the pictures. If you'd go ahead and just say a quick word about yourself and your experience with the cloud and engineering software, and then Mark will just move along with you and go across as everybody appears on the screen.
Hi, Jim. Yes, I'm Igor Sinman, president of AMC Bridge. We are a software development consultancy. We are working in the field of software development in engineering and AEC since 2000, almost 20 years, more than 20 years. And almost from the beginning, we started, our portfolio of projects always included cloud development from the very beginning. But most of the time it was for non-engineering firms at the start. And the only project that I discovered going back to early 2000 is the project related to publishing catalog of parts on the part of the big CAD company. But it all changed in 2011, 2012, and now we see a lot of projects coming in the industry where cloud is an essential part of it. In fact, in almost any projects that we got has a cloud component. So we have more than 20 years experience developing application in the cloud, and the last 10 years were especially intense time for cloud to penetrate engineering and AEC market.
Thanks, Igor. Mark?
Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Lind. I'm the head of strategy for ARIS. For those of you not familiar with ARIS, we're the disruptor in the PLM space and the fastest growing company worldwide. We're working with the largest global enterprises in the most complex scenarios around global product development, systems engineering, simulation, engineering to manufacturing, and out to supply chain. Really the digital thread traceability and digital twin representation of complex assets. We're providing enterprise SaaS designed specifically for complex modernization initiatives, either in outright global replacements of legacy or platform overlay for rapid digitalization of more strategic processes. With that, I'll hand it over to Lynn.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. So I'm Lynn Allen. I spent like 20 years working at Autodesk as their technology evangelist. The last 10 of those years were focused in the AEC industry, for those of you who have joined us in AEC. And now I work for Dassault Systems, I'm focused now on mechanical and manufacturing. Also as a technology evangelist. I started doing preaching the cloud back when you had to explain to people what the cloud actually meant. What was it? So I've been doing that for quite some time. I've written dozens of articles about the cloud and done plenty of presentations about the cloud. So I'm very excited about this opportunity to have this discussion with these wonderful gentlemen today. And at Dassault Systems, we're very focused on helping our SolidWorks customers make the move over to the 3D Experience platform, which is all about the cloud.
Oleg?
And I'll hand it over to Oleg.
Thank you, Jim, and a pleasure being here. My name is Oleg Shilovitsky. I'm CEO and co-founder of OpenBOM. And in my previous professional life, I was working for companies like Autodesk and Dassault Systèmes on the many projects in manufacturing and engineering software. At OpenBOM, we help manufacturing companies, and the OpenBOM is a software as a service cloud-based network that helps to manufacturing companies to manage their product data and connect them to contractors and suppliers. So at OpenBOM, we help them to manage information, share data, and perform any operations that related to the data management with the ease of Excel and sophistications of modern engineering and manufacturing software. And I'm very much excited to be here and share what we do and answer any questions. Thank you.
Great. Now, it's a fantastic team, and I've known all of you for quite a while, and really enjoy this opportunity. I have the privilege of asking some questions, but I'd also like to hear some questions from the audience, and we'll put those questions to our panelists as well, time permitting, and those that we don't have a chance to get to during the recorded, during the live presentation, we'll go ahead and try and respond after the fact. So let's start in with kind of what's changed. I'd like to understand from you all, what have you seen in sort of the willingness, desire within our space, within the engineering software world to adopt cloud solutions? What has everybody seen as the trend? All right, someone jumps in, or I pick.
Everybody's shy. Lynn, go ahead.
No, I'm not going to go first.
I can go first.
Like, I'm going to choose you.
You were afraid we were all going to talk over each other, and now we're like doing the opposite.
All right, Oleg, please.
I think I will start from the very fascinating story. Like about 10 years ago, when I was working on the previous project, I was coming to companies and asking them, what about cloud software? And they said, look, manufacturing companies will never, ever put any information on the cloud. And that was very interesting. 5 years later, I came to the same companies, the same colleagues in the industry with OpenBOM, and they asked me another question. They said, is it run on Amazon? Oh yeah, we are ready to do it. So I think that's in my simple summary what happens. The technology is improving, the adoption of companies and understanding of technologies is improving. And we see how companies gradually migrating from the old-fashioned way to the new technologies, new products, new capabilities, and this is a process. So this is what we see.
I would add and build on that by saying that, 5, 7, 10 years ago, there was a lot of hype about cloud for cloud's sake, that it was just about moving to the cloud. Without a lot of concrete benefits for the technology in particularly the engineering manufacturing scenarios. What we've seen at ARIS is that we've been able to characterize the benefits for these types of workloads and these types of scenarios so that you find companies had reticence around the security aspects, had reticence around the integration capabilities, were hesitant about the ability to have the functionality necessary to handle their complexity. Whereas today, we're seeing more companies recognizing that there are advantages, not just from the infrastructure standpoint, but also from the collaboration standpoint, from the data integration standpoint. And so we've been, particularly through the pandemic, seeing the shift towards cloud first types of questions where, say, even 3, 4, 5 years ago, people were asking, but then really tire kicking and saying, no, I'd rather have it in my own data center. So now it really is a cloud first type of conversation.
I totally agree. Conversation has changed so much, right? Where we went from having to explain what the benefits were, why they would want to do it. And now I know for us, we run into companies all the time that have cloud initiatives even where they're open-minded, they want to know what we have to offer, and that they're ready and willing to make the move over to the cloud. Not everybody, but that we're seeing more and more companies that already know the benefits when you walk in the door, and they are ready and willing to make that move.
Yeah, as I said, from my perspective, I just looked at the projects that we did over the last 20 years. And if at some point it was just a trickle of cloud projects in AEC and engineering, then right now it's pretty much every project includes cloud component. And again, on the other side, the first projects were coming from the developers of the software, like companies like Autodesk and SolidWorks and the like. Now the request for development comes from the manufacturers and AEC companies who really discovered benefits of clouds, and the COVID definitely a big trigger of it. I hope, I mean, it looks like it will speed up the process, but we'll see. It's immediate reaction. It's still gonna develop all the time.
Great. Oh, thanks. And you mentioned speeding up, and Mark, I know you mentioned the pandemic as well. And one of the things that we've seen from our research is that the pandemic actually caused companies to accelerate their digital transformation efforts, and actually things like collaboration became much more important. What have you guys seen in terms of the last 12 to 18 months of cloud acceleration or changes in requirements? Not necessarily, we know the trend is that it's more towards the cloud, but what is different in the last 12 to 18 months that really wasn't there prior to the pandemic?
I would go first, Jim, if you're okay. So I think what we've seen at OpenBOM, because we provide native cloud SaaS software, so what we've seen a lot of requests about how to make data easily available, and that was the kind of surge, because people tolerate their CAD files on desktops before pandemic probably more than when it started, because the availability of data, demand for data availability increased, and then any technology that helped to companies to capture this information and make it available to remote team actually accelerated. And that was our observation, as we provided OpenBOM seamless integrations with all CAD environments and systems. So people came to us and said, can you capture this information, make it available to our contractor team? Can you make it available to our engineering team? Because we just don't have other way to share this information in an easy form. And before we created Excels, but now it's kind of impossible, and share it's really unreliable. So that's where the huge surge for us, because people started to connect. And the second thing that came to us a lot, it's not necessarily the pandemic, but I think the supply chain disruption, what triggered it and accelerated it, as we provide more scenarios of what if happens if this supplier or another supplier, or these components or another components are not available. OpenBOM provides them a central storage of this information and capability to connect and prepare information for any particular supplier. So the process of switching between suppliers, it's very easy, and OpenBOM helps to share this information with anybody else with the click of the button. So they said, what if we will switch from this supplier to another supplier? So combining all this information, organizing its package, it usually takes time and its complexity. And people came and companies came to us with these requirements. And that was another second big increase in demand comparing to what we've seen as well. So that's just our take.
I would add a slightly different aspect of it. I think the COVID crisis increased the trust in cloud technologies, because it was almost miraculous, right? Overnight, what 50% of the working public went home, and maybe more, and actually work continued, and there are quite a few indications that productivity actually grew and interruptions were to a minimum. I mean, even we as a software developers and suppliers were surprised that we have to close our office, and within 24 hours, everybody was up and running and no big interruptions. I mean, fingers crossed and knock on the wood and everything, but we're working in this mode for almost a year and a half, right? And it's still working quite well. So I think it kind of added to the trust of the general public as well as companies that cloud is a stable and reliable platform that you can work on. I mean, notwithstanding the shortages and the ransomware attacks that we probably need to discuss separately.
It seemed like it really shined a light on some of the legacy installations where they were never originally designed for prolonged remote access. I mean, you can only get so far with Citrix kind of enablement in the largest global companies where you have tens of thousands of engineers trying to work concurrently. What we saw was that initially, through the shutdown in Q2 and into the summer, we were getting contacted at ARIS for augmentation scenarios where it was, let's say, cloud-enabled, rapid type of digitalization for the acceleration of remote scenarios and supply chain scenarios for collaboration. And now that we're moving through the winter and into Q1 here of 2021, there's a real, let's say, push to modernize. So the warts of the legacy on-prem type stuff were really kind of brought to the surface during the pandemic, and now there's a kind of push, if you will, with the reopening and the acceleration of resumption of business to make sure that those problems don't exist again. And the companies, at least that are approaching us, are talking about cloud scenarios where there's remote management, there's remote administration, plus the cloud collaboration for the end users.
And I'll chime in too. I can say that I absolutely believe that COVID contributed to the adoption of the cloud. There's no doubt about that. Suddenly everybody's isolated, working from home. I know if you think about the traditional SolidWorks user, for example, they're all about they have their desktop product on their computer and they go into the office for the most part. And there was a massive amounts of isolation that occurred after that. And before COVID hit, we were talking about 3D Experience platform. You can collaborate in this great environment built just for you, our CAD users, and so on and so forth. But it wasn't being adopted at as much as we had wanted. And then COVID hit, and then all of a sudden it's like they remembered what we were saying, and they started going, okay, now we really need it now. Okay, I'm sorry we didn't listen before, but now we really want it. And I know that for us, the sales and the adoption went up dramatically because people wanted to be able to collaborate. They needed to collaborate. They needed to do it on the cloud. They wanted their data so everybody could get to it. It definitely made a huge difference, so, and I'm sure that will continue now.
Let's go ahead and turn to our audience. If we can launch our first poll, and what I'd love to do is just understand a little bit from all of you that are joining. Where are you on your cloud journey? So if you can just take a minute to let us know. Either we see companies that are anywhere from not interested all the way there and running full cloud solutions, and sometimes it's the largest companies that are all the way there with cloud, and not just the startups. Although oftentimes smaller companies have the ability, and startups have the ability to go straight to the cloud. So give everybody just another little bit of time, and then we'll show the results. All right, so not interested. None of you out there are not interested, which may also be a little self-selective because you've chosen to join this webcast. But we see that really there are a lot of companies that are all the way down the path, and many more in process. So I think what we're hearing from our panelists today, in the fact that a lot of progress has been made and people have been moving forward, is definitely the case. Great, thank you for doing that. I'd like to talk a little bit about the benefits of the cloud, and you know, there are obviously a lot of general benefits that you could get from cloud anything: cloud email, cloud CRM, cloud ERP. But then, you know, there are also potentially some real unique benefits that we've seen with the cloud. Things like high performance computing for generative design, for example. That are pretty unique to our industry, that are pretty unique to engineering. You know, obviously resource usage, you know, less IT resources, et cetera, are beneficial, but are there things that you're seeing that are, you know, your users are asking you for, or users are seeing more value in, because of the fact that it is engineering software and that it's collaborative software for manufacturing and AEC? Igor, maybe we'll have you go first this time.
Sure. I think Alec touched on that issue already, but I would confirm that data availability and data sharing is the major benefit, especially in the remote working situations that we all kind of faced over the last 18 months. And that speed up significantly, and concerns of data locking in somebody's kind of workstation and an inability to share it and kind of collaborate on it is definitely a top of the concern that I hear. So data and so people are okay of taking their workstations home, right, and continue working on SolidWorks. The problem is they have to be able to share freely and collaborate on that data, as Lynn alluded to, and that's been a major push from my perspective, major advantage of cloud that our clients are seeing. I mean, availability and sharing of the data, kind of breaking the silos that we talked about for forever. It's actually happening because of this move, from my perspective. I mean, again, we have a limited and specific angle of looking at it, but that's what I see.
Me to jump in this time?
Yeah, I heard SolidWorks. So Lynn, maybe that was your cue.
Well, I mean, I think when I, you know, I said in the early days, I was talking about the benefits of the cloud, and I usually pointed out the three big reasons, right? There's the collaboration aspect of the cloud, there's the data management aspect of the cloud, access to your data anytime, anywhere, any place. But the biggest one to me was always that infinite computing, right? I think of the cloud as like this supercomputer where you can do amazing analysis that, you know, you really can't do on your computer, or at least you're no longer limited to whatever hardware that your budget allows you to buy, right? You have that amazing computing power so that, you know, if you're in the AEC space, maybe you can check out the energy analysis for a building, right? Or if you want to test out a part before you spend any money manufacturing it, and so on and so forth. All those, the basic simulations that in the past we just didn't do, or we handed it off to someone else to do. We're really opening that door to have it either done sooner or have it done in a scenario where it's just accessible to so many more people, which is great. And that's going to end up having a shorter time to market. It's going to end up having better products. And these are all things I think that really resonate in the engineering industry. Who doesn't want a supercomputer? Come on.
I've always wanted one.
That you don't have to store in your house.
I want one in my house, but that's different.
You want one in your house. Of course you do.
Middle of the bell curve. Mark, anything to add?
I would probably add and build on top what Mark said before, that technology by itself is not something that companies usually are excited about. So why do you need technology if I can already do work? So I think what cloud gives an additional advantages, and one of them I think already been mentioned, collaboration and data sharing on a massive scale, that companies can collaborate with other companies. And this is what at OpenBOM we've seen a lot, where it's not limited, even not limited to a single company, how companies can collaborate with contractors and suppliers. So the data sharing is a big deal for many companies. But the second that I want to bring, and we see it a lot, is intelligence. And an average person is smarter with Amazon application buying something than a manufacturing company thinking about procurement. So we're getting so much intelligence from our online application and what we use. And I think the intelligence will lead cloud companies forward also because they will provide this intelligence that's impossible without gathering information and providing this intelligence perspective to companies. And the last but not least, for many companies, technologies, previous technologies was not affordable. And cloud brings a different perspective because, again, simple, we share computing, but we also make it affordable for companies that before had to install servers, maintain application, and it just brings a different business model. And this is the way how we can sell in more affordable way to the companies that before were just doing Excels. Today they can go and buy subscription, affordable subscription, and go out with the enablement of cloud to new business models.
I would build on that and go back to Igor and Lynn's points about the data access. It's interesting, the cloud-enabled systems and SaaS and whatnot provide superior data access, especially for these remote scenarios and whatnot, and supply chain collaboration for the users that you have now. When you get into situations where you have data that needs to flow to other systems or into other areas, not all clouds are created equal, if you will. I mean, you effectively still have to do the same kind of homework that you needed to do before, looking at the APIs, making sure that you have complete API access to the data, and you can extract the data out to feed other systems, whether it's ERP or whether it's getting from CAD into the PLM into the MES, or whether you're talking about supply chain collaboration. There are not only technical restrictions that some of the cloud applications have, there's also licensing restrictions that some of the cloud providers are putting, or application providers are putting on, who owns the data. So you do actually have to do your homework. And of course, what you're looking for is complete open data access and full and secure APIs, right, with non-restrictive licensing. So those are some of the considerations you want to take into account as you're, evaluating how you're going to adopt and consume.
And actually, Mark, that kind of takes us a little bit towards concerns and risks. One of the questions that's already come in from the audience, and will not surprise anybody, was a question about security. And so one of the questions that I have is, what concerns or risks do companies have, and then what can software providers do to help alleviate those, or what can they do to help alleviate them themselves? And we've certainly seen a shift in the conversation around risk, both conversationally, but also in our research reports, where it was always the number one issue, always the first thing that came up. And we're starting to see, a lot more focus on other aspects. And I think the fear of the unknown has gone away a little bit with security. But whether it's security or other risks and concerns, what do companies need to think about? And Mark, you kind of started us down that path, and and what should they look for?
Well, I mean, I can continue, I guess, and just I'll do a quick say, when you're talking about the security aspects, you've got security is not security, right? You've got a broad range of different types of security, and you've got different reasons for security. So of course, there are certain industries which have regulatory requirements or compliance mandates, whether it's from governmental entities or from your customers, right? And you start to look down the data profile. There are certain data that are open to be shared across the supply chain. There are other data in your PLM architecture, your information architecture, which have certain restrictions on them, such as data sovereignty requirements, where they need to remain in country, or you need to have, let's say, need to know kind of contractual requirements, particularly in military scenarios like the type of customers ARIS deals with, you know, and you get into the supply chain collaboration aspect. Yes, in high-tech electronics, it's great to be able to just feed the contract manufacturers, but in, you know, automotive supply chains, there's IP considerations. In defense supply chains, there's the regulatory and type of governmental restrictions. And so those all need to be factored in. So you don't have kind of a one size fits all type of situation. Let's go to the cloud. You really want to look at the application's functionality, how the security model can accommodate the type of collaboration that your workload requires.
I would probably build on top of what Mark said. I think it's a really diversification and the requirements. And if this is defense contractor with the certain requirements, the technology should be compatible with this set of requirements. But what I want to build and bring it also to the question of IT people that working on this technology. And I think what we've seen is a gradual level of acceptance among IT people, because the first reaction 10 years ago probably was from IT people, oh no, cloud is going to steal my job. So I think that's where the security question always comes as a red herring. Oh, what if we will ask security question and then the problem disappear because everyone will be concerned and we will keep the job? I think that was probably 10 years ago. But as IT people discover that cloud actually is not going to steal their job and maybe even add more job to them, and to bring more value of what they can do. I think that was the level when we started to see more adoption to cloud systems and in cloud environment. And I see OpenBOM customers that using multiple cloud environments, and actually IT is now concerned how to manage all these cloud environments together, which brings a new level of challenge for them. But this is because cloud adoption is on the rise, so they're less concerned about security, more concerned about management. And on average, I don't want to quote exact number now, but I think on average company is using more than 2 dozens of cloud applications today at the same time. So the question of how to govern all these systems together, that's a big job for IT, and everyone is happy. At the same time, technological companies provide a better level of security, better level of governance, better level of management. And people finally, I think, understand that the data on the local computer is probably less secured than data on cloud services with the company infrastructure that protected physical locations and protected by different security mechanisms that physically left no space where to go and steal the data. And so I think the overall adoption is improving, and the concerns are moving from one space to another space. And that's what we see.
I know that when in the early days of cloud, it was the very first thing that anybody mentioned was security, right? That was the #1 issue. And when I worked at Autodesk, we would have somebody dedicated to talk about how secure it was. And then over time, those issues lightened and lightened and lightened. One of my favorite quotes actually is from John Hirschtick, where he says, your company may embrace the cloud, your company may reject the cloud, but one thing is for certain, every single company is using the cloud. Whether you like it or not, somewhere, somehow in your company, the cloud has been embraced. Even in the government agencies that are still questioning it, somewhere someone is using it, right? And the security issue is still believed it's, the cloud is so much more secure than on-premise with all of the security that it has around it nowadays, especially. And I just don't feel like we run into it as much as we used to. Even all the government agencies, one by one, are slowly but surely saying, okay, 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 okay. Eventually, I like to believe everyone will buy into it.
Well, we've seen the level of sophistication and maturity about the discussion. To your point, Lynn, I mean, you know, several years ago, whatever, 5+, it was like security, no.
Yeah.
Right? Easy answer is no. Whereas
Right.
today, it's really the level of specificity around the type of data, around the workload scenario, and around whatever compliance or you know concerns there are related to that specific aspect. And then you start to look at that in the context of overall processes and data governance, and that's a much more constructive conversation to have.
And there are even standards and protocols and specifications that companies are using today. It comes immediately out of them. So are you certified with this? Are you certified with something else? This is the questionnaire comes out of companies, so they already prepared.
Yeah, we actually had an interesting piece of data that correlated knowledge of standards and audit procedures for cloud with the level of concern that they had for security of the cloud. And what we found is that there was a real high correlation where those that were more knowledgeable about standards and audit procedures in the cloud, those that had that more mature view of it and more knowledgeable view, were less concerned about security. So
I would just add that it kind of evolution of technology goes hands with evolution of kind of consciousness, right? Quite a few of the biggest data leaks and quite a few of biggest scandals of intrusion happened because people were careless, not so much that technology was not there. So companies started to realize that you have to train your people, and I mean it goes from both ways. I mean, people realize that they cannot leave password as a password anymore, right? You leave it at your own kind of risk for your personal data. But on the company side, there are tools to verify the passwords, to change the passwords, multi-level authentication, and all this stuff. I think it's two conversion trends, technology and kind of personal awareness that this aspect of cloud has to be taken care of.
Good. The next question I'm going to ask, and we're going to start with the audience with a poll on this one, really stems from the fact that early on companies had a choice of either using cloud software or using highly capable software, because there were sort of immature solutions on the cloud or very mature solutions that had older technologies. So if we can pull up the next poll, what I'd really like to understand is how much functionality are companies willing to trade off in order to get to the advantage of the cloud benefits? The benefits that we talked about in terms of unlimited or seemingly unlimited capacity, or the benefits of better collaboration and data access that our panelists talked about. And it's interesting to see how this is changed over time. I'm really watching these results come in, and let's go ahead and share them with the audience. And it's kind of interesting to see that if you looked a ways back, you would see that for engineering software in particular, companies were willing to give up very little functionality for the benefits of the cloud. Let's go ahead and show the audience the results. So what we see now is a lot different. Early on, we saw that this very little or none would have been the majority of the answers. And now we're starting to see the shift towards, yeah, we're willing to give up some, or 1 out of 5 of you, 21%, is saying that you're willing to give up a significant amount of functionality to gain the benefits of the cloud. And at the same time, what we've seen is that it's not as important to make these trade-offs anymore, because cloud solutions have become much more mature, and the traditional solutions are now finding their way to the cloud. I'd love to just get your commentary on this as panelists in terms of what your views are of what types of functionality or how much functionality companies may be willing to give up for the cloud, or maybe why this has changed a little bit.
If I may start,
Please.
yeah, when we start a project, very often we have so-called discovery phase, where we sit down with the customer and talk about the future project and try to map it up and kind of put on paper, so to speak, requirements and limitations and goals of the project. And I see very often it starts and when the cloud is involved, it starts very high, and customer says, I want 100% of this desktop to be transferred to the cloud, period. And when you start talking, and very quickly they realize that cloud by itself takes care of certain functionalities like data sharing, right? And certain functionalities of this desktop were specifically designed to fit into the desktop environment or comply with the Windows requirements or something like that. So at the end of the day, this evolutionary process probably happened not only on the level of the project, but globally, when people realize that existing legacy applications sometimes have an extra capacities that are not used outside of the individual desktop. So I think there's a technology progress, as we mentioned, cloud becoming more capable, things you can do inside of the browser nowadays. I mean, look at Onshape. It's amazing. And at the same time, the people started realizing that not always and not all 100% are needed. Maybe you need something else, but not need this, right? So you may drop 20% of functionality that never used and instead add something that is cloud providing as a benefit. So it's kind of evolutionary process and going from this direction, personal and kind of individual and the technology as a security as well.
I agree. I love the responses. I love the answers that we got from the audience on that one. And I think that means that clearly we're beginning to realize the benefits of the cloud. So I think that's great. And I also totally agree with what Igor said in that the fact that, sorry, just got a frog in my throat.
You're all choked up about the cloud.
I got so choked up about it. But the fact that, you know, we really don't want to take that desktop product and move it as is to the cloud, because it doesn't make any sense at all. You want the benefits of the cloud to resonate with the product, and you want the part that doesn't resonate with the product to not be in it. So it's just a shift in mentality and a shift in thinking. And of course, whenever you say the word trade-off, nobody wants to make any trade-offs. Everybody wants the best of all worlds. I want everything I have here and everything I have there. And I think that once people start to make that move over to the cloud and they see that they don't need those things that they thought that they needed to have migrated over, that they will embrace it even more. They'll embrace it fully.
And there's what we see, at least at ARIS, is there's a kind of multi-dimensional aspect to this question, right? There's the tool itself, okay, you know, whether it's a CAD tool or a specific simulation type of environment or, you know, whatnot. And am I giving up any bells and whistles in that specific little area? And then there's the kind of functional scope question of, you know, as I enable cloud scenarios for broader business processes, do I run out of runway or hit a wall, you know, with respect to the necessity for certain types of scenarios? So yeah, okay, I can move my PDM, my MCAD management up to a cloud scenario, get some cloud benefits there and some collaboration. Do I then have the ability to extend into systems engineering, right? And do I have the ability to have cross-discipline collaboration between the electronics design and development as well as the hardware design and development? What about the software and firmware? How about the requirements management? What about the simulation, right? So the various different types of simulations, is that scope part of or able to be handled from a workload standpoint and now extend out to manufacturing, right? So am I able to take my engineering bill of materials and do a restructuring into the manufacturing bill of materials to feed my smart factory with the cloud package? Or am I limited just to BOM part change, right? Which is the case for an awful lot of the offerings on the market. BOM part change, that's about all you get. You really, what we're seeing, especially in large companies, is you need to have the latitude to be able to handle the complexity of the, today's real world scenarios, because the companies we're dealing with are developing autonomous vehicles and, next generation type of semiconductors. You have to be able to handle the workloads of tomorrow, or the cross-discipline, cross-functional type of scenarios of tomorrow.
Yeah, I would add what Mark, you said, what you see in the large companies and what we see at OpenBOM in many smaller scale companies. It is never about a trade-off. It's always about what needs to be done. And when I was talking to engineers that said, I wish I would be finding OpenBOM last week, because I spent like the entire week working on Excel, trying to combine different bill of materials and product structure from multiple systems. So that's where the ease of availability of the system and the functions that needed, that's what drives the first adoption. Like, it's not about trade. And on the other side, I just want to remember that it was always for entire years of the engineering and manufacturing software about how you can give 80% of needed functionality for 20% of cost. So that's how we moved from Pro-E to SolidWorks, and this is how people moved to some other systems that provided this combination of features, functions, and value in a much affordable way. And I think these things together will drive people to adopt systems, not necessarily trade. And I think that goes from value and what is impossible to do without cloud, rather than just trading between two systems that can do about the same. So that's what we see.
Yeah, thank you. And let's go ahead and bring up another poll question. I'd like to understand from our audience a little bit about their cloud strategy, really about what it is that they, that they're looking for from the cloud, or what it, what their corporate approach is. And we mentioned before that sometimes those are mandated by customers and/or by compliance. But yeah, let's go ahead and bring up our question about cloud strategy for adoption. And we have started to see from our end once in a while companies that before the knee-jerk reaction, the people that were most adamant were the ones that said, no, we won't consider cloud. And at one point, that was about half of the companies we spoke with. And now sometimes the most fervent and emphatic answers we get from people are the ones that say, oh no, we will only consider the cloud. It's definitely, there are people that are very strong on both sides of the argument. And then there's a lot of people that are in between. So let's go ahead and bring up the answers to the audience. And again, this is a group that has decided to join in on a webcast about the cloud. So as you see these results, let's go ahead and bring those up. You'll see that there actually aren't any companies on here that say they won't consider the cloud. And that's a little surprising, although I know that we had a few companies that decided that they wouldn't attend today because it wasn't interesting. So this might be a little self-selecting. But we do see, 18 plus 18%, so over a third are saying, we only use the cloud, or we use the cloud if it's available. And then more than another third saying prefer the cloud. So, there's still a quarter where, as I said before, it would have been a half some time back that say, or where in this case they're saying we will consider the cloud. And as I said before, we would have seen about half saying they wouldn't even consider the cloud in the past. So I guess my question back to the panel is: do you see a continued shift towards only cloud? Do you think we're just going to end up, the same way people were running mainframes before and moved into different infrastructures over time? This is just the next technology wave, and everything will be there? Or do you think we'll still see, some different models across time, and companies will pick the right tech, the right approach for for the right capability for some period of time in the future? Igor, maybe we'll start with you. I think you see a lot of customer requests, right?
Yeah, and I'm kind of wanna join Oleg in saying that first and foremost, companies have to see value, and they see more and more value in cloud, but at the same time, they don't want to discard completely. I mean, at least in our experience, the powerful machines that people have on their desktops, right? So they're trying to find a kind of winning combination where you can use your local power and not depend on the connectivity, so to speak, at least for some part of your work, and being able to share and being able to access data and being able to reap benefits of the clouds, like no installation or minimal installation for the some of the applications at least, and minimal dependency on your local hardware configuration. So I think the Oleg's point is that companies are trying to find value, and it kind of at one side, and another side is also been mentioned that the smaller companies right now have access to technologies that before were out of reach. As Lynn mentioned, the supercomputing capabilities of cloud, right? Simulation, buying the simulation time only days or even hours versus creating the in-house HPC cluster, right, to run your simulation is a big difference. So I think the path would be evolutionary more than revolutionary. And by the way, mainframes are still there. IBM is still making money on them, right? So it's gonna be a mixed bag for a while, and I don't think desktop, especially with the progress on the chip technology, continues to unabated. Desktop will go anywhere, but it's going to be a kind of value-based proposition on how best to combine them together and how best to work using all resources you have and company has.
I like these responses too from the audience, and I want to know who the companies are that are only cloud. I commend them. And I'm also drawn to one of our attendees, Karen Caswelch. I apologize if I butchered your last name. There's that frog again. But she made a comment about how so many startups are they only want cloud, right? Fully embracing the cloud. So I do think that part of this is somewhat generational. Kids coming out of college and starting companies and moving forward. I think it's very clear that the newer companies are definitely focused on embracing the cloud as much as possible. And I think that definitely we're going to see more and more companies that go that direction. It's going to be very clear to them. And thank you for your comment, Karen.
Oleg, Mark, anything to add there?
I think I agree with Igor's approach. It's a mixed bag, and the things will be evolving together, not necessarily sharp turn from not using all the technologies. And I think we will see some unexpected changes in this process as the different technologies will evolve. You probably remember at the beginning, the question was if cloud is fast enough to support 3D CAD systems. And I remember John Hirschtick was saying now the bandwidth is fast enough to run CAD applications online. So here's the thing, the bandwidth continues so fast, now it's good enough to transfer CAD files. So people not paying attention how they transferring CAD files. So they said, I can host the desktop. It doesn't solve some other problems. So that's it's a combination of things. But for somebody who said, I want to virtualize now, it's not a problem with the good bandwidth to virtualize their desktops and continue to use file-based software for different reasons. So it will be going a combination of things, but I think most importantly, people will be looking for value. And I think lean is spot on, and new companies, a new generation of people, when they start, they are starting from fresh, and they don't have a baggage, they don't have a history. And people come in and asking questions like, what is file? My kids certainly do it. What is file? Like, why do I need it? I need it to install the game, right? So that's the only thing that I need file, and everything else is on Google. So I think that comes as a mixed combination of things, and we will see the progress gradual towards the adoption of these technologies. But somebody will still make money on files, like IBM still making money on mobile machines and all this mainframes. So you keep this in mind as well.
Yeah, I mean, at ARIS, what we're seeing is that, especially in big companies and large global enterprises where the complexity is high, there's a lot of, let's say, installed legacy, sometimes thousands of systems that are in place already that aren't going anywhere fast, right? That you're really looking at these hybrid type scenarios where we're deploying in the cloud, offering SaaS, providing the ability to have, let's say, one of the things I've heard in the past, and it's part of our point of view, is cloud's not cloud like it's off like shared computing. Cloud is about distributed computing, right? So you take advantage of the horsepower where it exists, depending on the workflow and the scenario. You have cloud plus edge, if you will. There are factory systems in place, whether they're legacy or new, that cannot go down, right? That cannot, so you can't have, let's say, situations where if internet connectivity is interrupted, that the whole plant or multiple plants shut down. What we find is you're into situations where you've got the cloud capability that is then feeding and drawing from these types of factory environments. You have the engineering capacity, which is enabling the remote work and the supply chain collaboration. You now wind up with multiple clouds, in other words, hybrid cloud scenarios, as well as the cloud plus data center type of scenarios. Again, workload specific, very different in simulation and systems engineering than, say, the engineering to manufacturing type of scenarios.
We've only got a couple of minutes before we wrap up here, and I want to thank everybody for asking questions. And there's a couple of really good questions. Some are a little more detailed than others. I would like to just maybe get a quick word or two from each of you, or any of you that have an opinion on one question, which is, do you see differences in attitudes in the cloud between manufacturing and AEC? So maybe just a short bit from anybody on that.
From my perspective, AEC being late to the technology market, so to speak, adoption, to a degree more open to the cloud. That's my impression at this point. It's still in early stages, but it's kind of consideration from the very start of the cloud. And because of the distributed nature of construction by default, it's a very important tool, and it's been recognized as such. So, but the level of adoption of technology in AEC is far behind of manufacturing, so it creates this strange dichotomy. They're more open to advanced technology, but the base, the technological quote-unquote, culture of AEC is still behind of manufacturing, and has to evolve quickly to catch up.
I'll add on that. I know it's framed as AEC. We're really focused mostly on the manufacturing verticals. However, what we've seen from, say, engineering, procurement, and construction type of large global firms is that they are increasingly looking for the type of scale and functionality that our SaaS and cloud offering delivers. And when they come to us looking for flexibility for, scenario specific types of workflows, that they're looking for cloud. So, it's an interesting dynamic. That's even in the largest global EPCs.
I agree as well with
Go ahead.
Igor in that I think that AEC does tend to fall behind mechanical as far as the adoption of technology for sure. And AEC is a very wide spectrum, right? And there are parts of the AEC industry that has embraced more technology than the rest of it. That's what you were alluding to as well, Mark. But because of the BIM process, right, it does need to be collaborative. And so they have, in some cases, just like you mentioned, Igor, they have definitely realized that, oh, I'm gonna have to share. I guess I better embrace the cloud in some way, shape, or form. So that is just kind of been forced on them to embrace this cloud technology that has not happened as much in the manufacturing space or the mechanical space, because they can actually be a little more isolated and work in a siloed environment a little bit more, I think, than AEC can, depending, of course, on what area of that industry you're talking about. But so that's my view on it.
I think there is something really interesting happens in AEC, and although at OpenBOM we started from manufacturing, we recently got a lot of requests from construction companies. So we even started a new website, aecbom.com. But what we see is that there is an interest from AEC companies to become more manufacturing companies. So they are looking how to adopt manufacturing technology. So this is the trend that clearly we see in AEC space. So I think we will see AEC as one industry in manufacturing, and that will be mixed of the technology and will be mixed of the products, because it's sometimes really hard to say if it's manufacturing company or it's a construction company. And there are a lot of examples like this.
Great. Well, listen, we're a couple of minutes over time. I want to thank the panelists for joining and for all taking their turns, not talking over each other very well. I know that we all have lots of great opinions to share, and I appreciate your expertise and your time. And for the audience, I really appreciate you spending the time and listening today, and for participating in our polls. And on behalf of Tech Clarity, but more importantly from our sponsor here, AMC Bridge, I'd like to thank all of you all for participating, and just really excited to continue this conversation through this series of webcasts. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you, Jim.